Well, good morning. It's Sunday is a good day because we get to gather together and sing and be encouraged. There's nothing better than this in my mind. Maybe I'm supposed to say that because I'm a pastor, but I do really truly enjoy singing with all of you. Of course, I enjoy the worship team, but I stand in the front partially so I don't get distracted, but partially so that I can hear all of you singing behind me. That's one of my joys is being encouraged by you all as we gather. And I trust that our time in the Word this morning will do that for you as well. I'm sure at some point in your life you've been spurred to be a part of a cause or the cause, whatever it might be. All around our world, you could just drive down the street and see on the popular corner all the yard signs that are advertising for different causes, right? The Cub Scouts pancake breakfast, the Firehouse bingo. Maybe it's the school board fundraiser or the animal shelter or the political candidate or the municipal council or the band or whatever. You could go on and on and on and on, right? You could see any one of those signs even on the streets around town. And I don't know about you, but when I drive by those things, when I'm bombarded with those things online, I get overwhelmed. It's dizzying to see all of the different things that we can get behind, and my tendency is to just shut it off. Well, I can't consider all of them, and so I'm just not going to consider any of them. And how many times are we faced with this question of what should I get behind? What should I support? What should I do? How should I spend my time and my energy and my money? And because it's so dizzying, like I said, we tend to shut it off, and we do what we want to do anyway. We don't get behind anything of substance. And this passage we have in front of us this morning is interesting. It talks about, maybe not because it uses the word, but it talks about the kind of purpose that we should have as followers of Jesus. Mark is going to show us in this passage this morning that if we pursue the greatest cause, the greatest purpose of all, the one that trumps every other cause, we can live a life that glorifies Jesus. We can find a life that's satisfied, not one where we're jumping from one thing to the other, running all over the place like chickens with their heads cut off, but we can live a life that is purposed. And the result then is that we can properly sort out all the other things that we should be involved in. As we come to the book of Mark, we believe, at least in some way, that everything in the book of Mark kind of hinges on a couple pivotal passages right in the middle of the book. In Mark chapter 8, Mark tells this account of Jesus asking the disciples, who do you say I am? And right in the heart of that is Peter confessing that Jesus is the Christ. He is the Messiah. Directly following that, Jesus makes a statement about what it means to follow him. We have on our graphic, we're calling the series in the book of Mark, The Way of the Cross. And that's what Jesus calls following him. He says, if you're going to follow me, come after me, take up your cross and deny yourself. The way of the cross. So everything in the book of Mark either leads up to those statements or in some way follows those statements. Following in the way of the cross. And Mark is showing us what it means to follow Jesus, what it means to be his disciple. Following Jesus means following in the way of the cross. It's a path of sacrifice, a path of denying yourself, and a path of aiming your life at one goal. So in chapter 1, where we are this morning, chapter 1, verses 29 to 39, Jesus shows us that the way of the cross comes by pursuing humble purpose. Comes by pursuing humble purpose. So I'd like to start by reading our passage. It's in Mark chapter 1, verses 29 to 39. I encourage you to open the Bible in front of you. It's going to be on the screen, but I encourage you to open a Bible if you need one. There's one in a chair in front of you, hopefully close by, and on that Bible will be in page 699. So follow along as I read Mark chapter 1, verses 29 to 39. As soon as they left the synagogue, they went with James and John to the home of Simon and Andrew. Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they immediately told Jesus about her. So he went to her, took her hand, and helped her up. The fever left her, and she began to wait on them. That evening after sunset, the people brought to Jesus all the sick and demon-possessed. The whole town gathered at the door, and Jesus healed many who had various diseases. He also drove out many demons, but he would not let the demons speak because they knew who he was. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Simon and his companions went to look for him, and when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone is looking for you." Jesus replied, "Let us go somewhere else, to the nearby villages, so I can preach there also. That is why I have come." So he traveled through Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and driving out demons. So in this passage, Jesus shows us that the way of the cross is to pursue humble purpose. Pursue humble purpose. And this path to pursuing humble purpose involves 3 denial of self sort of actions. We are going to find that Jesus calls us to serve one another humbly, carry each other's burdens, and sacrifice our own purposes. So let's dive in. Let's look at this first action that we see we are called to. Look again at verses 29 to 31. Mark writes, "As soon as they left the synagogue, they went with James and John to the home of Simon and Andrew. Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they immediately told Jesus about her. So he went to her, took her hand, and helped her up. The fever left her, and she began to wait on them." Serve one another humbly. Why do you say serve along with me? Say serve. It's been a while since I've been up here. You guys will catch on. I believe in participation. Collaboration, can I call it that? You guys are helping me make the point. Serve one another humbly. So you don't immediately catch both of them, but this passage contains 2 of this theme word immediately that we've seen a couple times already in chapter 1. Look for that word as you read through Mark. Immediately, immediately, immediately. And this pair of theme words comes up twice here. It actually is kind of disguised at the very beginning of verse 29. As soon as. That's the word immediately. Immediately, Jesus and the disciples left the synagogue where Jesus had been preaching, and they went straight for Simon, for Peter's house. And as they arrive, immediately they tell Jesus, Peter's mother-in-law she's very sick. She has a fever. She's laid up in bed. In his account of this story, Luke, the physician, highlights for us that this was a high fever. She had a great fever. It wasn't a little pesty 99 or 100-degree fever. This was a great fever, and she was laid out in bed. She couldn't do anything. So Jesus has just demonstrated his power over the demons. He's in the synagogue. He's preaching, and he has just demonstrated his power over the demons. That's what we looked at last week. And now in this passage, he's going to demonstrate his power and his authority over physical illness. And he's going to start by doing it up close and personal. Imagine all this unfolding kind of like a movie. Jesus is in the synagogue. The scene is of him and the disciples there. And then the director yells, "Cut!" And you get a glimpse then of the next shot. Jesus and his disciples they're walking. You maybe catch a few seconds of their transition from the synagogue to Peter's house. And then he says, "Cut!" again. And boom, there's Jesus. And he's in the house. He's in Peter's house. Now imagine where his mother-in-law would have been. She probably would have been in a sick room that they had, or maybe her bedroom. And so Jesus makes his way through the house. He makes his way through the house, goes right up to Peter's mother-in-law's bedside. And what does he do? He takes her hand. Actually, the primary thing he does is he helps her. He helps her. He helps her by taking her hand and raising her up. And then we see that the fever leaves her. This was truly a miracle. It wasn't the physical touch of Jesus that healed her. It wasn't because he had been lifting and he was able to raise her up. Right? It wasn't that. It was simply because Jesus loved and cared for her. This miracle happened because Jesus had a deep affection and concern for his friends and the family of his friends. And so he exercises his will, his power to make her well. It's not hard to imagine a scene like this if you have a mother. Right? I'm sure there was at least one time in your life where you've been laid up in bed. Maybe the laid up definition has been exaggerated. I'm not sure. Maybe truly you were laid up, but maybe you had one of those fevers or that runny nose. Maybe you were out of commission for some reason. And your mother's love and care for you spurred her to nurse you back to health, right? That there was no concern for whether she was going to get sick, right? Think about what Jesus did. This woman had a high fever, and he walks up to her and touches her. Well, what if you got the fever? That's no small act. And our mothers do the same thing too, right? Your mother doesn't say, I'm going to stay on the other side of the house because you've got a runny nose. There's tissues over there. You can take care of it, right? Or the fever, right? That you were never denied snuggles or a hug because you had a fever. Now, although those are concerns, those are smaller concerns compared to the greater concerns. They're thrown out the window in light of her care for you. They're thrown out the window in light of Jesus' care. Because what was on the line was much more important than getting sick or not. So I think this is exactly the sort of thing that Mark is calling you and I to consider. But maybe you are a mother, and that is an application, is that your concern and care for others, especially your kids and your family, would be one of humble service to them. But we can do that with one another as well. Jesus is calling us, just like he did with Peter's mother-in-law, to meet each other's needs in a humble way, to come alongside each other in a personal way even, right? Just like he took her hand, we ought to come to one another and help care for one another's needs. And I know that we are supposed to follow the example of Jesus because Peter's mother-in-law did. Did you catch what she did after Jesus healed her? The fever, I'm reading in verse 31. So he went up to her, took her hand, and helped her up, and the fever left her. And what? She began to wait on them. So here is Jesus coming and serving humbly, meeting her needs. And Peter's mother-in-law, well, first of all, it was a miracle because immediately the fever's gone. And so she hops up out of bed. And what does she do? She begins serving in the same way that Jesus did. She was making a meal. She was hosting. She was making them, Jesus and the disciples, feel at home. The reality is you can't do this if you're thinking about yourself. If you're thinking about yourself, you cannot humbly serve one another. All of it starts with truly considering, slowing down, setting our own needs aside so that we can perceive the needs of others. In the words of Paul, putting off and putting on, we need to put off thinking about ourselves and merely our own needs. We need to turn and invest our time and energy into the needs of others. I love those sounds. Truly. So first, we need to serve one another humbly. Let's turn to our second action, verses 32 to 34. Follow along as I read those verses. Mark says, that evening after sunset, the people brought to Jesus all the sick and demon-possessed. The whole town gathered at the door, and Jesus healed many who had various diseases. He also drove out many demons, but he would not let the demons speak because they knew who he was. The second action is to carry each other's burdens. Say carry. Carry. Now we have in front of us another shot if the movie was to continue. Jesus heals Peter's mother-in-law, and here in this shot, Peter and his disciples, they're still at Peter's house, but now instead of being in the back room, they are at the front door. And who's come to the front door? It seems like the whole town has come to the front door of Peter's house. And people have brought all of their sick, all of the demon-possessed people. And on top of that, not just the sick people, the whole town has come to the door to see the show. Now, Mark is certainly using hyperbole. Right? There's no way that literally every soul was at the front door. This is a big town. And is it really true that every single sick person, every single person with something wrong is at the front door? I'm not sure. But probably not. We should notice a contrast. Well, probably not. We should notice a contrast. Jesus goes from a face-to-face, literally face-to-face healing, to healing, ministering to dozens of people. And there's another interesting detail that Mark includes here as well. Beginning of verse 32, he says, that evening after sunset, we know what day this is. This is the Sabbath because of the previous passage. Jesus had been in the synagogue on the Sabbath, and they go to Peter's house. So this is, we would assume, the same day. It's still the Sabbath. And at sunset, the Sabbath would have ended. So the Sabbath began and ended at sunset. So these people who brought their sick, they waited until the Sabbath was over to bring their sick people to Jesus. Now this is kind of interesting. I don't think Mark's purpose is to show us what we should or shouldn't do on the Sabbath. The reality is these people waited. And so I think Mark is trying to draw our attention not so much to the sick people, not so much to the demon-possessed people, or even Jesus himself, but I think Mark, in a small way, is trying to draw our attention to the people who brought their sick to Jesus. The way in which those people got there was that they were most likely carried. I bet many of them who needed healing were just like Peter's mother-in-law. They were laid up in bed, maybe with a fever, maybe with something else. And if they were going to make it to Jesus, somebody was going to have to carry them or help them and bring them. And that is why they waited until after the Sabbath, so that they would not be carrying a burden on the Sabbath. It was an effort on their part to not violate the law. Think about it. You've got family or friends who are not in good shape. Others are demon-possessed and also not in good shape. And you look at your loved one and you're like, I've got to do something. There's something that I have to do to help this person. And then you realize there's this man, Jesus, who's in town. And you know that he has a reputation for healing people. You know that there's something special about him. Did you hear what he can do? He just touches people, and they're better, just like that. They're good to go. So if I could just get my friend, if I could just get my family member, if I could just get them to the front door, they'll be okay. But I have no doubt that you have at least one person in your life who needs help, who is in a bad way in some way. There's got to be at least a couple people who you know who are physically or spiritually sick. So why has God put you in their life? It's an important question for us to answer. And I think based on Mark chapter 1, part of the reason that you're in their life is so that you can help carry them to Jesus. Now for us, this is probably not carrying someone on a stretcher. It's certainly not carrying someone on a stretcher to Jesus, maybe to the hospital, maybe in their time of need. But the idea is to carry each other's burdens. Look at Galatians chapter 6, verse 2. That's what Paul writes. He says, carry each other's burdens. And in this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. So I know you have people in your life who have needs. The question is also, are you helping carry their burdens? Are you actually perceiving and looking and caring to see the burdens that other people are carrying? Are you actually helping one another? And we're going deep here. This is a third layer of this questioning is you have people, what are you doing? Are you actually helping? And then where are you taking them? Are you taking them to the one who has the reputation for healing people? Now, I think in our day, we should spiritualize this. We have great needs all around us. Think about this. This town, man, how did this town get so full of sick people? Where did they all come from? I don't really have a good answer to that question. But I know in our world, we have all sorts of sick people. You and me are sometimes sick people. All of us are just like the rest of us in that way, that we need help from someone greater than us. We need help from Jesus. We have spiritual burdens. We have emotional cares. We have hurts. We have temptations. We have things that we are carrying that we need to be carried to Jesus, the one who can truly help us. And the reality is, this takes great sacrifice. If you're going to do this for someone, it takes sacrifice. If these people had waited until the Sabbath was over to carry their friends and family to Jesus, I bet that they thought about how they were going to do it, right? They were intentional in waiting until the end of the Sabbath, and so they were also intentional about getting them there. They probably would have thought, oh man, I know I got to get this person, so we're going to need a stretcher. I'm going to have to ask the neighbor if they still have that stretcher, if we can borrow it, right? And I think we might need some extra bandages, and the boys are going to need their sandals because they are going to have to help carry, right? You can see the picture that this was thought out. It took effort. And it was dark. It was dark. I don't like going out in the dark. Imagine first century Israel going out in the dark, right? There's no flashlights. There's no LED headlights in your car. There's no cars at all. This is all done in the dark by hand. And these people, they served hard to care for their loved ones. So helping others is sacrificial and it's purposeful. So through your prayers, lift one another up to the Lord. In your counsel, the way you talk with one another, the way that you point people with your words, point people to Jesus. We know that he's the one who provides everything that we need to live godly lives. He's not like the systems and the advice of our world, which is simply pointing us back to ourselves. Through your help, serve one another. Carry the burdens of one another as you help, as you meet physical needs. Don't miss opportunities to do that. And Mark finishes this section with an interesting comment about the demons. He says that he cast out many demons as well, but he would not let them speak. They knew who he was, but he would not let them announce who he was. And I think the reality with this is simple. Jesus was not going to have others hijacking his purpose. He was not going to have others messing with the reason that he came to earth, so much so that he wouldn't even let the demons talk about who he was. Which leads us to our third action. Our third action is to sacrifice your own purposes. Let's look at verses 35 to 39. It says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Simon and his companions went to look for him. And when they found him, they exclaimed, everyone is looking for you. Jesus replied, let us go somewhere else to the nearby villages so that I can preach there also. That is why I have come." So he traveled throughout Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and driving out demons. This third action that we need to take is sacrifice your own purposes. Not sacrifice your one purpose, rather sacrifice your own purposes. Say sacrifice. So, keep picturing this with me. Jesus is up late at night after the sun has gone down. Who knows how long he was there healing people? Eventually, he goes to bed. And before the sun comes up, Jesus has left the house. He's gotten up, he's left the house, and he's gone out to a solitary place, Mark says. He's gone out to a place that is removed. It's almost like a wilderness sort of place. And what does he do there? He prays. He prays. And the exchanges that follow, I think, are fascinating. It says that Simon and his companions, who knows when they woke up, they woke up later and they realized, Jesus, he's not here. Where'd he go? I didn't even hear him. Where did he go? And so they are frantically looking for him, right? They are searching, they're scouring, they're hot on the trails of Jesus. Where did he go? You know, they look around town and all the houses, they don't see him. Maybe they look alongside the road, and I mean, how long did it take them to find Jesus in this solitary place, this place that was removed from everyone else? But they do, and when they find him, after they look for him, they're like, Jesus, what are you doing? Everybody's looking for you. Why are you out here? And you can't tell me that the Bible is boring, right? It's almost like they're annoyed at him. Like, Jesus, like, what are you doing? Like, trying to slap Jesus up the back of the head. Like, what are you doing, Jesus? As if Jesus didn't know. The phrase that the disciples use, Peter and his companions, they're not even called the disciples. They're called his companions, his posse, right? The phrase that they use, everyone is looking for you. In my study, I found that word, looking for you, every other time it's used with almost like a malicious intent. Now, I don't think Peter and the others were being malicious with Jesus, but I think it's drawing us to consider that Peter had a different purpose than Jesus had. His purpose, their purpose in looking for Jesus was not lining up with what Jesus was doing. He was setting himself apart. He was praying, relying on the Father so that he could accomplish what God had sent him to do. He was pursuing the Father's purpose, or at least setting himself up to do so. Peter, it seems, was looking for Jesus to come back and keep doing the miracles that he had been doing. But Jesus says, that's not why I am here. Because he says, we have to go. We have to go on to the next place. My purpose here is done. My purpose is not to heal every physical disease in this place. My purpose is to go on to the next town, to the next village, so I can preach there also. What was Jesus preaching? He was preaching that he had come to be the Savior of the world. Jesus was prioritizing God's greater purpose instead of his own. How easy would it have been for Jesus to go back into the town, to go back to Peter's house? All he had to do was stand at the front door. Everybody would have kept coming to him. But that's not what God had sent him to do. He sent Jesus to preach and to preach throughout the region. And I think Jesus' his actions of simply waking up before the sun demonstrate that Jesus was committed to God's purpose for his life, the Father's purpose. Waking up before the sun doesn't happen on accident. I know, because it was hard for me this morning. My alarm got snoozed. It was a little bit later than I wanted. Right? It takes clarity of purpose to be up early. You're up to read or to work out or to go to your job. You are set on something, and that's what Jesus was as well. You and I coming back to this idea of all sorts of purposes that we're going to be drawn to. It's not only the purposes that are posted on the corners with yard signs. It's purposes in my own heart that lead me to not prioritize Jesus' purpose for my life, to be his disciple, to deny myself and follow him. He's made me in his image so I can be a visible representation of the invisible God. He's put me on this earth for a purpose, and it is to declare how great he is. The reality is, if I'm not declaring how great God is, I'm probably declaring how great I am. And that is to mix up what God has put me here for. So how do we do this, right? It's nice for us to think about these, package this very neatly. 3 actions: serve one another humbly, carry each other's burdens, sacrifice your own purposes. But I would also argue that pursuing your own purpose, or pursuing humble purpose like Mark calls us to, is nearly impossible. Right? If you've tried to serve others, if you've tried to carry the burdens of someone else, if you've tried to sacrifice your own purpose, you know that achieving any one of those is elusive. Right? Pridefully spending my time and energy on myself, complaining about my own burdens, and the age-old "I know better than you" attitude seem to creep into our thinking and our actions more than humbly pursuing the purpose that God has given us. The Bible gives us a positive picture of following Jesus. That is, it assumes that you can do it. The Bible assumes that you can follow Jesus. And Mark echoes this, I think. First of all, in part, it's believing that Jesus is the one who has authority. He's the one who has authority over the spiritual world. Jesus is the one who has authority over the physical world. It starts with that belief. But I think closer to the heart of the gospel is the fact that Jesus himself pursued humble purpose. Jesus himself pursued humble purpose, right? Even in this passage, Jesus, he served others humbly. He healed the sick. He sacrificed what he wanted to do on his own. And he did it in this passage as he healed Peter's mother-in-law. He did it in this passage as he healed the sick, the masses, the many. He ministered to them, and even as he moved on to the next town. But even more than just the things in this passage, Jesus pursued humble purpose when he went to the cross. In his life and death on the cross, Jesus served you. Jesus served you. How low did he have to humble himself to do that? And at just the right time, God sent Jesus to be born of a woman and purchase your freedom so that you could be his child. Jesus did that at just the right time, carrying your burdens. Your freedom came at a cost. Jesus prayed that his Father's will would be done above his own in John 17 as he was approaching the cross. He said, "Father, I want to do what you would have me to do more than I would want to do my own thing." And even as Jesus hung on the cross, the soldiers mocked him. They mocked him and said, "You're the king of the Jews, right? You're the king of Israel. Why don't you just come down? Why don't you bring an army and take you away?" I was looking at Mark chapter 15, and it even says that the Pharisees mocked Jesus. Mark 15:32 says that the men who were crucifying Jesus, the ones who had hung him on the cross, put nails through his hands and feet, they also heaped insults on him. I'm afraid this is precisely what is at stake for you and me. To pursue your own purpose is not just a little whoopsie. It's not just unhealthy. It is an exaltation of yourself, and it heaps insults on Jesus, just like they did when they hung him on the cross. There's one way to follow him, and Mark calls it the way of the cross. In that moment on the cross, it was only Jesus who realized that to save himself was to fail pursuing the Father's purpose. Any effort to save yourself is a guaranteed failure. Just like Jesus, he's calling you and I to surrender the idea of saving ourselves and instead trust God's purpose is bigger and better and grander and the only life-giving pursuit that you will ever find. So begin by believing in Jesus, the Savior. And then, from there, the overflow of being transformed. Serve one another humbly, carry each other's burdens, and sacrifice your own purposes. And if you do this, you will pursue humble purpose and follow in the way of the cross and experience life better than any other life you could ever find. All of your other purposes and causes will fall into line, and you will be satisfied in Jesus. Let's pray together. Lord, we are grateful that you have given us this account in Mark, which shows us how we can follow you. Oh, how we need your help, Lord. This is impossible on our own. So I ask that you would strengthen us. Would you point us in the right direction? And would you guide our misguided purposes? Would you correct our misshaped desires? And would you help us serve one another and carry the burdens of one another and pursue the purpose that you've given us to make much of you? I pray this in Jesus' name, amen.